All right, welcome everyone. We're gonna give it a few more seconds for people to trickle in. Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Promise Okeke. I'm the CEO of NovoPath. Welcome to another episode of the NovoPath Expert Series. We've been doing this series now since last year, and really it's our way to sort of bring some of the industry's top voices together, with everyone to really empower the lab community with, best practices and topical, issues and how we can keep advancing the industry. Today's webinar is going to be on overcoming bottlenecks. These are, issues that pretty much every laboratory goes through. We all have, different things that, we do see in the laboratory. And today we have a great speaker. He's well known and renowned in the industry, Dr. Garcia from Mayo Clinic. He's going to look at the common lab bottlenecks, real-world solutions, and how AI and technology leadership factor in. And then we're gonna wrap things up with Q&A, at the end. Usually how we do this in the past is, throughout the presentation of our expert, please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A link here on Zoom, and then we will try and get through all the questions as much as possible. And then after the call, we will send notes on the webinar to everyone. So if you cannot stay for the whole call, we will be sending out notes to everyone and a video of this too at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Dr. Chris Garcia is the medical director in the Division of Computational Pathology and Artificial Intelligence at the Mayo Clinic. As everyone knows, Mayo Clinic is a big shop. He's a pathologist with subspecialty training in pathology informatics. He has about 10 years of experience in both, in industry, reference laboratory, and academic medicine. He currently focuses on developing and evaluating and integrating AI and machine learning solutions into clinical operations and practice. He practices in laboratory medicine and pathology. Dr. Garcia is also a board member of the Digital Pathology Association, who we collaborate a lot with. Thanks for being here with us, Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Thomas.
So why don't we jump in? I think when we talk about these bottlenecks, in the lab industry, you have outdated processes, you have staffing burnout, and we've really had, we have staffing shortages also a lot, especially in 2020 during COVID, and really it's been there. Things are a lot better today versus 5 years ago, but we still have a lot of shortage of pathologists and techs throughout the industry. You have compliance hurdles, you have data silos that you have to deal with, and really other examples of bottlenecks that labs today face. Dr. Garcia, can you please, talk us through these things and hopefully arm us with some tools and how we should be thinking about this as the lab participants?
No, absolutely. And thanks again for having me. I think myself and probably everybody on this webinar looks at these and realizes that these are all real world problems. And as you mentioned, I've been a few places, happily here at the Mayo Clinic, but also have been at other reference labs and other institutions. And I don't know of any place I've been or any of, institutions where I have colleagues or friends that don't face these real issues. And it's just the nature of what we do in healthcare and in laboratory medicine and pathology. So manual workflows, absolutely. I mean, that's what we are. We are a workforce, and we find ways to get things done, to take care of issues. And things are the way they are because we have had the tools that we've had. But I think we've all able to recognize in certain labs or certain processes that the manual nature can be really difficult to overcome. And it can actually lead to what we have in the next box, which can be staffing burnout and shortages. There's no way to say that if you move towards automated process that you're then going to reduce staffing burnout. But I think that's a lot of the reason why we look at these solutions is to make it so that our staff and ourselves spend less time on some of the drudgery that can make our work difficult and risky and very unenjoyable. Now we all have jobs to get done, but manual workflows are, I think, something that we can all recognize. For staffing shortages and burnout, I think it switches from certain laboratory areas to others, but I think we all face these, whether it is in pathologists or laboratory scientists, specialized technicians, especially if you're running esoteric tests, we can really run into severe shortages. And it's important to be able to have that expertise and those skills to be able to not only overcome inefficiencies and delays, but even to be able to provide the testing that our colleagues are asking for taking care of their patients, for providing answers. Another one that I think we're all feeling, especially as there's more and more discussion around the laboratory developed tests and the FDA, which I don't have any specific comments on at this time, is compliance and documentation. So there's always going to be regulations about documenting what we do in the labs and how we do our quality processes. And there's a reason why our industry is regulated. But the more and more compliance regulations and documentation grow, the more it puts a burden on our labs. And we need to be able to find solutions to manage that, especially as I mentioned, LDTs are a hot issue right now. And then I think something that I've seen, maybe it's because I'm an informaticist at heart in laboratory medicine pathology, is the data silos. So we are unique in most of our practices in that we have our own information systems for running the laboratory or for running blood banks and so on. We have data information systems that are disconnected from the larger group. And sometimes to be able to do our specialized testing, we have multiple different information systems that then are integrated in a specific way. And sometimes, there aren't clear integration opportunities for those solutions with each other, and it leads to the cycle of having more manual workflows. Fragmented technology, I think we see these in any lab that has been in operation for multiple years. Technology comes and goes. Some technologies actually connect well with others. Some run so well, but they don't update them. So you're looking at running them on even old Windows platforms behind the scenes or whatever it may be. IT and IT management is a real must-have capability for being able to provide laboratory testing and pathology services in this world. So I think we're all feeling this. I know I've had the opportunity to tour some brand new labs that are starting up, especially that are very specialized. And you look at them and you go, wow, they have such a big IT team and everything's shiny and new. And that is exciting, but it is also something that you recognize once you've been in operation for a few years, then you get into the fragmented technology. So it's just it's the reality of today. And the last one is inflated costs. I think we feel this all the time because to do our work, we have reagent costs, and we have technology costs, and we have services costs, and we live in a world where we are sourcing a lot of these materials from local and from international areas, and we're affected by policies that come out. We're affected by changes in markets and from companies having their own shortages from their suppliers. So we can definitely feel that even though we may have a good budget at the beginning of the year, There's always going to be something that comes out of the blue. And all of these things end up being bottlenecks, whether it's being able to provide an assay, whether it's hitting inefficiencies, whether it is even having to determine what's going to be on your lab test catalog. All of these have those kinds of impacts. And so I'm kind of dove into this as you mentioned each one of them, but these are all things that everybody wakes up every day and faces. And that's where it's important to realize that. As wonderful as it can be to map out a new workflow and try to overcome inefficiencies, I think each one of these 6, and these aren't the only ones, but they definitely contribute to grounding our plans into what can be done. And just to say that strategy is super important for overcoming key bottlenecks, but so is an operational culture and an attitude towards realizing that best laid plans are wonderful, but are not necessarily going to overcome everything. Boy, that seemed a little dark, but next slide. So what can we do to overcome these issues? And I mean, there's a lot of amazing labs out there. I am sure that our attendees have trained at some amazing places, and we're always looking for best practices. And I hope that as we touch on these, you can think of groups that have done this really well, or opportunities where you've done this in your own practice, because really running a laboratory is living in a world of continual improvement. So we're always looking for these opportunities. And workflow standardization is so easy to say, but it can be very difficult to do, especially the bigger an operation you have and the more organically your lab test catalog has grown. It's important to realize that workflow standardization needs to be done not only at one time, but continually. This is something that really helps us with data silos, that really helps us with reducing manual errors and manual processes, and is key for any kind of automation. Really have to put some thought into this and some work into this. And so while we want to reduce inefficiencies and streamline processes, I think that last bit is crucial. You really can't automate tasks without some kind of workflow standardization. And a lot of times this workflow standardization grows as the testing becomes more routine. And so you will see our partners on the device side come up with new automated workflows that can have more sensitive testing, or do batch processing in a different way. Or if you look at some of the really cool esoteric testing going out in maybe the microbial world or in the genetics world, there's some really cool automation with like specimen prep and handling and genetic barcoding that just can't be possible without thinking of workflow standardization. The next area is lab digitization. So this could be key for automating tasks. They're not one-in-one, but you really can't automate a task if it's not digitized in some way. And the idea is to replace paper-based workflows with digital solutions. And as you mentioned, I am on the board of the Digital Pathology Association. For the majority of my career and my training, I have worked in areas of digital pathology, whether that is on the device side or on the system side, or an implementation, or even in the AI, which I get to focus on now. And it all requires digitization, which probably not surprisingly also requires a standardization for that digitized process. So this could be something as as complex and of a hot topic as digitizing your pathology slides with whole slide images and changing your operation to be digitized or digital in that way. But it could also be scanning paperwork and using tools to be able to extract that information that you need. Because I think most labs that are not a specialty labs specifically, you send out testing to reference labs or specialty labs and you receive them back at least in the hospital and the clinic, for patient care, and you're receiving them all the time. So lab digitization can really help remove manual processes there, like having to hand enter everything that comes in. But lab digitization is its own world, as is digital transformation, which is a buzzword, but really is a whole industry these days. Then I would say data and reporting. This is really key. And in the lab, we could talk about reporting back on patient results, but this is really thinking about using data to make informed decisions about what's going on in the lab. So it's really hard to understand a bottleneck without some kind of measurement, without some kind of quantitative understanding of what's going on. And then to manage those, you have to have reporting capability to really see what's going on over time. Because it's great to have a snapshot and make a decision, but it's so crucial for all of us to be able to see, well, is that intervention or that decision that we made, is it making a downstream impact? And as I mentioned, and as we all know, you can make a decision once and make a change once. It doesn't mean that you're going to weather the storm. And I just think, speaking specifically around data and reporting, some of the labs that are just so impressive when they really invested this over years is getting that real-time visibility, because there really is a graduation from data and reporting. You can have snapshots, you could have self-service reporting, all the way to having a capable staff that can do ad hoc reports. There's a wide variety, but those who use this to really understand and provide actionable insights on who needs this information now, they've done this well. I know I did some of my training at Intermountain Healthcare. I think they had some amazing operational data and reporting at the time for making sure that the testing was getting out to the clients or to the physicians as soon as possible. And then as you look at the large reference labs, there's some amazing reporting to be able to keep an operation of that size running. And things like predictive modeling for capacity and for knowing what tests are going to be coming in that week and how you need to staff up. All of these things are wonderful. They're hard to get to, and you have to graduate, but those are definitely amazing areas to work through. And just an outside of the lab perspective on data and reporting that kind of leads into the next one is, I know during my training, I did a master's degree at MIT focusing on systems engineering, so solving complex issues. And we had this great opportunity to go to an Amazon warehouse out in California that I think was a half-mile wide and just heavily automated. And they had something called the war room. You go into the war room, and it was amazing how many reports and insights they had going on the operation. I'm not advocating for Amazon. I know that there are issues in workplace that has been brought up, but just really how they put their work together and being able to handle a massive amount of shipments and be able to get products out to us as consumers. And if you live in a big city, it could even be within a day time frame. It is impressive. And I think it's always good to go and learn from other industries what they're doing. And last, I would say AI and automation. Really, the goal here is to take what you have done in the first three: workflow standardizations, digitization, and data-informed decision-making, and being able to scale that up. And this takes planning and this takes investment, but it really can build upon those top three and allow us to scale what we're doing to be able to provide more services and more testing to more patients, to be able to reduce that turnaround time. And of course, it's not just AI and automation do this by themselves, it's the application in the area which it goes, but it really can minimize errors. The more we take some components of human error out of it, that's a great opportunity. And the last one would be boost efficiency, which is wonderful. We really want to be able to empower our teams to be able to do more while also providing the best services that we can possibly. But the last thing I want to put in the AI and automation, which I really believe in, and I work with a lot of great people at the Mayo Clinic who are focusing on this, as well as a lot of people outside of the Mayo Clinic who are very much working at introducing machine learning and AI into the processes, is that you can create new capabilities for what we can provide as answers for patients, whether that's a predictive model or being able to handle really complex information. AI is really an enabler there. So as we look at those really kind of groundbreaking tests, whether it's shotgun metagenomics in the microbe world, or let's say minimum residual disease testing in the cancer world, all of those things also require machine learning. And when coupled with AI and automation to make that more efficiency, not only are you scaling what you can do, but you're also providing new capabilities for patients. So these are solutions that go, and I'm sure a lot of us could point out different case studies from different labs. But hopefully you see that this is a pretty good bedrock of ways to look at how people are trying to make a difference in providing what we do as a lab. Next slide, please. So I really want to advocate that as we talk about AI, AI is a concept. I usually like to say data-enabled capabilities. So that could be machine learning, it could be a large language model, it could be automation, it could be decision, rules engines, it could be a lot of different things. So AI has existed in the lab space for a long time. I think when most people talk about AI now, we're talking about deep learning and large pre-trained models like foundation models or large language models, and seeing what they can do to provide help in our lab workflow. But think of it as a tool. It's a data-enabled tool. And these are tools. They are not a replacement. If you look at trying to engage these kinds of tools as much as possible, we are taking some of that decision-making and some of that judgment that we do as humans, and we're offloading it to a system that has been validated and specifically created for that task. And so in that way, you think of it as a partner. There's a really, really cool group out of MIT that talks about, oh gosh, it's the CCI, but it's really talking about how do we look at our organizations and how we do our work, and how do we include computation and AI as a team member, as opposed to as a tool. So what are you offloading for decision making? And remember that AI is a partner. It's not your boss. It really is something that also has to be managed. So as you bring in these kinds of tools, make sure that you have the insight and the oversight to be able to manage that tool and that decision-making opportunity correctly. Next one is computational pathology. Now, there's a lot of good points out there. I think maybe 5 years ago, we were talking about this theoretically, and now you can see marketable tools that you can actually go to vendors and use, and you can see how computational pathology can reduce inefficiencies and also improve standardization of certain kinds of diagnoses. But I know as a pathologist, I never enjoy going down on 40x and counting mitoses. It's not something that puts me in a calm state, and computational pathology tools can really help speed that up and also make better informed decisions. Practical adoption steps. The idea here is when you're looking at these advanced tools, don't get overwhelmed and don't necessarily believe all the marketing hype. Marketing exists to be able to get us excited and to look at a situation. It doesn't tell us what to do. And so the real way to do this is to identify a practical issue that you have in the lab. Start small. Make sure that there's a real ROI, because while AI is exciting, when we're talking about practical implementations, it's no longer research. It's a tool to help us do what we need to do. And if you can start small and really prove that it works for you and it has a benefit, then you'll have an idea of how to scale it up in your lab, when to use it, when not to use it. And the last thing, which shouldn't be the last, it should be up front, but really cultural resistance and data challenges, these exist. And they're real, and we all work with people, and we are all people. So communication is key. There is fear around AI. Is it going to take my job? I think as you get to know these tools, you work on it, it's more likely it's going to help you do your job and help you scale up. But these are real things, and you want to have people be involved early, understand what's going on, understand that it can be exciting. You're using new tools, you're trying to empower them to be able to do more and to change how they work. And I know personally, I don't really enjoy working in a situation where you have no power to improve it. I'm just one of those people who loves to be able to find solutions to problems and make them real. And I don't think I'm alone in that. So if there's a way to engage key stakeholders early, that's the only way to make any kind of practical implementation of any data-driven decision tool a reality, is getting people involved early, understand how it affects their lives and their story, and move forward. And there's a quote from Daniel Kahneman, who has a wonderful body of work talking about how humans make decisions, and I think a really famous book called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. But he said, nobody ever made a decision based on a number. They make a decision based on a story. And I think that really speaks to adopting tools and changing the way that we work. You really have to make sure that everybody understands their part in the story and why it makes sense for them to be able to adopt these tools and make it work and provide the right oversight. So lots of exciting things going on, trying to ground it a little bit in real things that we face in adopting these and how they can be helpful. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, culture and leadership is key. And honestly, the larger your organization goes, the bigger and more complex that challenge is to overcome. But there's a lot of ways to do this. One, I'm a big believer in servant leadership. And so as you could probably tell in the way that I was talking about it, I think going down to the grassroots level and working up is really key. But no matter the size of where you go, leadership really needs to believe that there has to be a change in culture to be able to make it effective. Grassroots can only get you so far, and while it's necessary, you have to have top down and bottom up to really make a change. Right now at the Mayo Clinic, we have a new chair and some new leaders, and they're really working at continually building the culture of efficiency and workflow improvement. And right now we're calling it the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathology Management System. But it really is about culture and leadership. And I know when I was training, I was at ARUP laboratories out in Utah, and they had a really strong culture. And Dr. Schellsberg, who was one of the founding leaders of ARUP, he had this amazing rotation that I was able to take about leadership in the lab. And he really made it clear to me that every person counts, from the person who does the janitorial services, to the person who does security, to the person running the lab tests, to everything. Everybody needs to feel involved, and that really can only be done with leadership being consistent and moving that forward. And that really does mean that, yes, leadership and culture comes from the top and from the bottom and from the sides, but you really have to have a clear idea of what you're doing. And that's where I think proactive workflow design, that really needs to be a strategy that is bought in from all those angles, but definitely from the top. The middle point is building an innovation-focused culture. I know that sounds really buzzy, but innovation is just about finding new solutions to problems that exist. And so if that really is the culture that you want to foster, it fits really well with what we're talking about with automation, with workflow improvement. But there's lots of ways to do this. And to get people to care about this, you have to incentivize in some way. So that could be financial. It could definitely be recognition. It could be, putting innovation part of any kind of lab meeting agenda. What are we doing here? How can we recognize it? Let's recognize promise for the great decision he made. We've been tracking it, and we've become more efficient in this test, and our turnaround time has improved, and any concerns that we had from clinicians is going down. If there's some way to recognize successful innovation and improvement in that culture, it goes a long way. And the last bit is staff training and development. We talked about a lot of different things. We talked about workflow standardization, digitization, automation, all of these different things. They don't happen by accident, and they don't happen by themselves. They happen because people put in time and effort to make it work. And a lot of the things that we're asking people to do, do come naturally to laboratories, and many don't. Right now, we have a lot of work at Mayo Clinic, especially in my area, of trying to increase, we say data literacy, but it's providing training for data tools for those in the laboratory who now find a need to be able to do better reporting and better innovation. And we find that as a key area, investing in all levels, whether it is our faculty or pathologist leads, allied health staffs, our technicians, our educators, being able to give them tools to be able to better engage with this new reality of digital services and data is key. And so I see not only where I am now, but we had initiatives when I was at LabCorp, we had initiatives when I was at the RUP, everywhere I've been. So it isn't just the reference labs. There's always an advantage to training our staff, upskilling ourselves to be able to use the best tools that we can. And the last thing I would mention about staff training and development is, I think this is what we always want to do. Our world changes so fast. The technology has usually changed so fast, and our understanding of diseases change very rapidly. So this is just part of, I think, our existence in the lab, and I'm probably preaching to the choir, but training and development are just something that you just can't skimp on. So next slide. And a great way to start is, yes, we talked about some vague areas or some broad areas where solutions lie. Really don't go down any rabbit holes until you understand your own problems and your own areas where you want to improve. And that requires first assessing where you're at. So how can you look at your current state and understand where you think the problem points are, and really prioritizing which ones are the most important opportunities for you to have improvement. So that does involve putting efforts in mapping current states, if you're not already doing that, and also trying to understand which of those bottlenecks matter the most. And then with that, you can start going, what is my solution here? How far can I go? Does it need a little bit of workflow improvement and standardization? Is this something that is a good fit for automation? That's a good question. I wouldn't say, you need triplicates of cobas, automation lines if you're in a small community hospital. So just right sizing and find the right opportunities for what you're doing makes the most sense. And really, there's a lot of wonderful improvements for workflow and for efficiencies with staff, satisfaction being higher, bringing new capabilities to patients. All of these things are important, but there are also those realities of the financial aspects of keeping the lab up and running. And so really being able to understand these in terms of your finances is also key, because you could find the best workflow efficiency and the greatest science behind it, but it may not make financial sense. So that's always going to be a key part of it. So I know I talked really broadly, but promise I've heard a little bit about NovoPath's work in this area, and I'd love to ask you if you could talk to us about NovoPath's workflow assessment services.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Garcia. And you raised a lot of very interesting and insightful perspectives for us here. I think the truth is sometimes really doing this work of assessing your workflow as a laboratory is very difficult. And even when you really understand some things of bottlenecks, sometimes it's hard to really know what truly is a bottleneck And then how bad of a bottleneck is that, relative to other laboratories? So it's always sometimes hard to really understand the gravity of that bottleneck, which is why, we sort of launched this new program, is this sort of workflow assessment program that we launched recently, where we want to meet, we want to send our team. Usually we send our team to meet with the laboratory, and this is complimentary, by the way. We meet with the laboratory, we measure their lab's performance, we help them understand, what their current practice today is, what those bottlenecks they have today is. We also help them really sort of understand what that means in relation to other laboratories, right? We really, and then by understanding that, we give you feedback on best practices, how you can improve your operations, how you can reduce cost. Hey, maybe this thing that you're calling a bottleneck isn't really as bad as you think, because other laboratories have similar issues, and there is no way of automating that. But we really give you an objective view of your situation, of your lab, and and then if you want to talk to us further, then we can work with you on potentially using our solution to automate that for you. And again, if that's where the relationship ends, that's also fine. But it really helps the laboratory to really understand what they're doing well and what they can improve. And to really apply, what you have to do is to go to novopath.com/workflow, and all the details will be available to you. We will also send an email after this on the link to apply, but it's novopath.com/workflow. But Dr. Garcia, thank you so much for all those insights. That was great. So we want to move to Q&A real quick. We want to hear from every one of you, please. So ask your questions. Put that in the Q&A section there. We want to hear from you. We want to see how Dr. Garcia can further provide insight on how you can go out there tomorrow and really start reducing and working on those bottlenecks in your laboratories. So the next 20 minutes are going to be for Q&A. We already have a couple Q&A questions, so we'll start with that and then go from there.
Oh, great.
All right. So someone asked, what are some common mistakes labs make when trying to optimize workflow, and how can they avoid them?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call could speak from experience as well. Common mistakes, I'll think of one in my line. So I was at an institution, we were implementing digital pathology. It was not the Mayo Clinic. And one of our key issues is we were changing a workflow. We were, bringing in a fancy equipment, and we didn't bring the right stakeholders to the table in that improvement initiative. So we learned really quickly, especially with digital pathology, that IT needs to be at the table when you're looking at vetting any kind of solutions, as well as quality. And so I think that's one, like, we jump to solutioning, and that can be really key. So I think that's one, just making sure you have the right stakeholders involved in those decisions is key. And it totally depends on what you're focusing on on improving, but that's really important. And I would say that can extend not only within the lab, but especially if it's you have a key partner outside the lab in the clinical area, making sure that they're aware of any major change and how it makes sense to them. They don't have to be involved in the planning necessarily, but you get the feedback. That's really key. Another issue is just jumping straight to a solution. Sometimes we get really excited when we hear about somebody having a new kind of automation or a new tool that's out there, and it's easy to get shiny object syndrome, where you're kind of turning your head going, oh, they've solved all my problems. And while that would be lovely, I've never seen that be the case. We still have to really take a look at what our needs are, what our problems are, and practically evaluate whether that solution is going to solve that problem. So I think that's another one is sometimes we get a little bit of buyer's remorse. It goes back to, yes, marketing exists for a reason, but really look at, is it solving the problem that you have? Other ones are, making a decision in a small silo in a large lab. Sometimes you change your workflow or change what you're doing, and it affects a lot of other people. So making sure that you're not making those decisions in a silo. If you have an opportunity to make sure that those other operational pieces have insight and have say in helping you solve a problem. I think maybe this is reference lab from my experience, but if you make a big change, it could have downstream impacts. So just somehow have that systems thinking awareness of, you know, what I do affects other people, and I should probably have kind of a RACI in mind of, you know, who's responsible, you know, who needs to be informed, and so on. But those are a couple of things that I've seen. You know, it's easy to move too fast ahead without taking into account maybe the downstream issues that can happen.
Yeah, I think that's very good. And I think, one of the things that, we've seen when it comes to sort of really trying to optimize workflows, change management is hard. I think if you really implement anything, it's really hard to get folks bought in, but having your team be part of that decision-making process, getting the key stakeholders involved early, even in the identification of the problem phase, even before you start solutioning, but really in getting them early in the sort of let's identify the problems. I think that starting early with them really can be a big game changer. One of the labs we did this for, is a derm laboratory in Boston, Epiderm. And we got them involved, we got involved early, but also they got involved their team and their stakeholders early in the process to really understand what the problem is to be solved. What also understand how we're going to measure success. Even before we start the solutioning, and by identifying the measurement of success early on, and again, the key stakeholders involved early on, it was a lot easier for change management. It was a lot easier for them to change their workflow, and they were very keen on best practices. Hey, we know we've been doing this for 10, 15 years, but we want to actually see what are the best practices. We want to adopt them, even if they feel hard initially. It took a while for everyone to get bought in, even after we applied the solution, for them to really see value. But within 6 to 9 months, they really started to see value. Their turnaround time was significantly expedited. Staff were happier because things were no longer as manual anymore. They didn't spend so much time doing the same thing over and over again, because you also have to think about your staff, right? If they're wasting their time doing something that is so manual that you could automate, that kills morale. And if folks are not happy, it's no matter how great or shiny the solution is, if your folks are not happy, that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm. No, totally agree. Absolutely.
Good. So the next question here, what are the real world examples of AI improving lab efficiency and reducing errors?
Oh, yeah, really good point. So I can bring up a couple, and it doesn't always have to be AI, but oh, gee, I wish I had like a paper to point you to. But I can say from my time when I was at LabCorp, they had, I think about 10 years ago, purchased a robotics company. So again, out of the realm of reality for most of us. But they had such high volumes of blood tubes coming in from all around the country, and the processes were too manual for accessioning those in. And so they built an automation line just for handling all of the specimens as they came in, standardizing them, putting them in what looked like kind of like really fancy robotic milk jugs for being able to label them and do RFID labeling. And that really did require some computer vision analysis to recognize which tubes do which and to sort them. So that is, a high level, yes. Think about like a manufacturing plant or an auto plant. They have a large line with lots of robotics and they're doing that. But if you look at some of the papers that are coming out in computational pathology with some of the vended tools for prostate cancer algorithm, not only detection, but grading, there are quite a few of those papers that show efficiencies, not only in catching errors or making the pathologist do double check the work, or having AI as a as a safety net, and in making sure that you're not missing any potential cancers, but also in the efficiencies of working up those cases. So almost every one of those pathology algorithm groups now is trying to publish what is the efficiency that comes out of this. I think those are two very different ones. The last one I would point out is there are quite a few vendors out there who are using AI tools to be able to manage outside paperwork. And there are some real efficiencies that come from that, as opposed to if you have some kind of outreach and you're receiving specimens from nursing homes or GI groups for pathology reading. That isn't always handled via an electronic portal. Now, those portals are not AI, but those things I can say in real world, having an electronic ordering portal can really save a lot of manual work downstream. So big advocate for those. But when you can't, these AI tools out there that can really help accession this outside paperwork, those have a whole lot of efficiencies, but they're not published on as much as the academic research studies around pathology, computational pathology. But I would say those kinds of AI tools for really helping reduce the manual workflow are real world issues, real world cases.
That makes sense. Yeah, and we also see at least when it comes to AI, I think my advice has always been start small, measure, and then you scale. And we do see maybe different point solutions in this for us where we want to really solve one particular problem. It could be, hey, I want to be able to really look at all my data and be able to do something really neat with my data, and I want to be able to apply some foundational model to do some analysis. And that could be just a point solution that you want to solve before you really scale AI into the entire operation. And we see laboratories now who are really trying to really use natural language, an LLM to be able to do that, analysis on their existing data to really understand ways they could be efficient, but also just to track things. Because even if you've actually sort of created things I would call, efficiency innovations, if you do not track these efficiency innovations, it's just hard to really know if you're improving, if you're getting better or not. And AI can be
That's so
used to be
true.
able to actually track that in real time. Also, just help you sort of manage the different efficiency innovations you're working in the laboratory.
And I have to admit, I'm holding back on a lot of projects we have going on where I'm at now. One, it's not published yet, and I think that'll be best to speak with real numbers and efficiencies. But there's just so much work going on in our laboratories right now for trying to meaningfully integrate AI to produce efficiencies. But I think the ones right now that you're going to see most published are just as you mentioned, and as we were talking about, the ones that have a vendor that can help make that happen. But there's just so many opportunities. And if you look at other industries, and like I had mentioned, Amazon or car manufacturing, they're all using intelligent tools to help make decisions and scale up workflows. And I really do think we have a lot of momentum in seeing those tools starting to translate into the lab.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I think we've come to the end of the webinar. Dr. Garcia, I want to really thank you, for making the time. I think this was very helpful for us, for me, even as a participant in the webinar. I think one of my key takeaways, one has to just embrace a structured, strategic approach to drive internal alignment from the beginning. Change management is hard. And so having the key stakeholders involved early on, even in the problem identification, and maybe creating the culture for the change management is really, really critical. So, we are always excited to get involved with, clients, but also non-clients who want to really better understand their workflow and how they can improve operations. So, but we want to thank you, Dr. Garcia, for your insights, and also thank other participants for making this possible. We'll be following up with the content we shared today. So both the PowerPoints and the video, which was recorded. So we'll be sharing that with other participants after the call. But thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.